I got an email recently from someone who said they were too depressed to publish. They basically said, I like all your resources, they're really useful, but I can't do anything. I'm too depressed to put my book out there. And I wrote a response that I shared on Facebook, which I think is good, which I'll share, but it wasn't really enough. So in this video, I'll talk a little bit more about how to deal with depression when you're writing your book. So what I basically wrote back was, release it first, promote it later. The market decides whether they like it. The work is what it is. Don't let your feelings or doubts stop you from getting it out there. Which is good advice, but the problem is I didn't fully recognize that this could have been a case of real depression and not just the normal fears and insecurities that you'll face when you publish your book. Something I talked a lot about in Bookcraft was the true root of creative confidence. I said there's basically two universal reasons that you will feel fear when you create something new. I don't know if I can remember them off the top of my head, but I think they were value and quality, which means, is this any good? Is it good enough? Am I good enough? Can I write? And value, will other people like it? Is this worth anything? Will I make enough money to pay back the investment? So those two things I think are important, and I solve them by introducing a framework from a 19th century book on solitude by William Alger that talked about the 3 orders of creative wretchedness. I have all that stuff up on writethemagic.com and in the book Bookcraft. But the main idea was that if you focus, and I also got this comment on Facebook, which is something I used to agree with, which is basically, if you focus on writing a book to market, if you do your research, you won't feel as much fear or insecurity or doubt because you'll have a much better indication of whether or not anybody wants this book. You might even have, tested it out with what I call teaser text, or I've called it other things in the past few years, but basically, like, rather than publishing the full book, you put out the first chapter, you see if anybody likes it, you get some feedback before you launch it. Those kind of things, and just, in general, knowing more about how publishing works and how marketing works will limit some of the fear and insecurity and doubt, which is not untrue. So I stand behind that. But as I also pointed out in Bookcraft, but I put it at like the end of it, I put a big section about brain maintenance, because it's also true that writing a book is the hardest thing you can possibly do. It demands so much of your creative energy. You're going to feel exhausted and frustrated and demotivated, and that's part of the writing process. Because you're depleting so much creative energy, it's absolutely normal to sink into those deep lows, those emotional lows, where you do feel like you're wasting your time, especially if you've published several books before that didn't hit, or you've spent, $5,000 is the average most first authors make publishing and promoting their book without ever selling more than 100 copies. It can be difficult to keep writing when you feel like you're wasting your time and money. So those are reasonable fears and insecurities. They're not things that you can fix by telling yourself to be more confident or faking, motivation or whatever. The other thing I said is that motivation or productivity, it's not about forcing yourself to do the work. It's not about just chugging coffee and caffeine and forcing yourself to do it, because if you have a limitation, it's probably because of a imbalance in neurochemistry, basically, which means that it's something that you can solve with proper balancing, whether it's supplements or medication. So let me, real briefly, I went back and edited this quick comment on Facebook and I rewrote it. I'll post it down in the YouTube comments. But basically I said, if you have real depression, you probably aren't going to feel like writing at all. It's probably going to be hard to get out of bed at all. It's not just that you don't believe that your writing is good and that people will pay for it. You don't even believe that, anything in life has any kind of meaningful purpose that's worth getting out of bed. It's not something you can fix or choose to get out of. I've suffered from depression for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Luckily, I've never had chronic, depression, but I've also been very eager to actively pursue supplements or medications or whatever I could get to try to help me to stay positive or functional, at least. I won't necessarily say productive or motivated. I still have significant issues with procrastination, but I'm doing things to overcome. I have also recently discovered that I fit ADHD tendencies. I'm also an INTP, which is a very obvious procrastinator. If you look at any of the memes for INTP, they're pretty ridiculous. They fit me pretty well. I've embraced that I might have ADHD tendencies. I've been seeking a psychologist or a psychiatrist for help. I've been trying Ritalin, which isn't my favorite, but does. I might make another video about ADHD because it's not really the subject of this. But what I found with Ritalin is that it doesn't make me feel any different. It doesn't stimulate me like it would with someone who doesn't have ADHD. What it does is remove the ridiculous barrier to beginning the easy work that I don't want to do. So it doesn't make me more productive or motivated, but it takes away the insane 12-hour procrastination that I would usually do and then feel terrible about, and it just increases the depressive cycle. When I was super depressed, I would just try to, even just pass the time enjoyably by allowing myself to take a few weeks off to rest and recuperate by binging Netflix, which didn't solve the issue because I was probably eating junk food or wasn't getting enough exercise. I would try to go out for walks or whatever. Real depression is not something you can just choose to fix. So if you have a significant problem with productivity or just feeling awful all the time, it's not your fault, and it may not be your decision. It may not be something that's under your control. So do research or ask for help or get help or make an appointment with, depending on your situation or circumstances, if it's completely okay to be depressed because bad things have happened to you. That's completely normal. And that may be, a process, a long-term process of healing, but it's also completely okay to be depressed without any reason, just because. And that's sometimes worse because you're like, I don't deserve the depression. I don't deserve to feel bad. Why can't I just be happy? My life is pretty good. That's not something that you can choose. So feeling bad about not writing when you're depressed is kind of ridiculous because that's not something you have control over. Writing is a tremendously difficult creative task. It's harder than anything else that you want to do. So don't force yourself to try to do it or feel bad that you're not doing it. Focus on the underlying causes. Figure out, what can I take? I have a big list on writethemagic.com. I made a big list about dopamine and neurotransmitters and supplements and things that you can try just for basic brain health maintenance, which I think can be really advantageous even if you're not suffering with real depression. Even if you're just suffering with, I feel pretty good, I still have fear and insecurity sometimes, I have problems with procrastination sometimes, which is all completely normal if you're a writer. So don't fight against it. Recognize that that's part of the process. I like to say that, an hour of writing and 10 hours of procrastination afterwards, especially if you hit a story, a roadblock, if you hit a problem and you can't write because there's a problem, you might need that 10 hours of Netflix or, rest and recovery of doing nothing just for the epiphany to strike so that you can keep writing again. You can't always force your way through it. So I don't know if I've said anything useful in this video, but I wanted to touch on it because I do think it's a big issue with creative people specifically, but also with the vast majority of writers. I made another video a minute ago about the top 100 best writers or best blogs for writers, where I was talking about, the 90% of the marketplace are authors who are not writing books that will be successful because they're not trying to write books that will be successful because they're determined not to consider the market. I do think you can alleviate some of the insecurity and the discomfort by doing basic research about writing and publishing and learning the industry and learning how to do it well intentionally, and becoming a better writer, which doesn't necessarily mean on the line by line, word choice, sentence structure level, but just writing better stories. There's an objective quality metric for good commercial stories. By commercial, I just means it has value that other people are willing to pay for. Those are the biggest limitations that most authors never recognize or come to face, and they don't understand why their books don't sell, even if they think they've done everything right. I also hear, a common frustration is, I've been doing this for 5 years, I've done everything, I've tried everything, nothing is working, I'm ready to give up, am I even cut out for this? Almost always, 100%, if it's not working yet, you're not doing everything right yet. You don't have enough reviews yet, your cover isn't right, it's not communicating the benefits to the right audience. There's always a reason your books aren't selling. So you can always get better at boosting conversion by learning what's wrong and fixing it. You can always get better at writing better books that people enjoy more. There's always an opportunity for growth, but it depends on, learning what went wrong, being open to realizing that the way you are doing it is not working and that there's a better way. There's always a better way. This is definitely a learnable skill. You can learn to write books that generate income and make money from your books, but most people won't. Most people will not do what it takes to learn how to make money with their books because they're not trying, because they've been told that the only way to write a good book is not to listen to the market, not try to write commercial fiction or nonfiction, simply listen to your genius or whatever. I understand and appreciate that advice. I understand why authors like that advice. It does help in the productivity phase if you don't have to worry about the reception and you can just do whatever feels good or whatever feels, makes you happy, because it is fun to just write books for yourself in the beginning. And that does give you the experience of writing and finishing some books, which is a good way to start. But eventually, it's probably going to be the case that the books that you wrote for fun do not satisfy the market, because the books that satisfy the market were written intentionally. They do certain things. They avoid common amateur errors that most authors never learn because they're not trying to improve their craft. Anyway, I hope this video helps a little bit. I do think it's an important topic. If you are feeling isolated or alone or depressed about your books, you can always reach out to me. You can always join Guerrilla Publishing, the Facebook group. I'm pretty active on Facebook or YouTube or wherever. So if you're feeling like super down, you need help, let me know. I'll do my best to help you. Support groups where you can communicate with other authors in your genre or outside of your genre. Just being around other authors who are always struggling with similar problems and challenges, even like the super successful, big, famous authors, I guarantee you they're struggling with the exact same issues. They just have more content and they're making more money, so it's easier for them, but they're still, everybody has their own challenges to face. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Although there are some authors that are crushing it and doing everything right, I guarantee you they always have bad days. Everybody gets negative reviews. Insecurity, fear, doubt is a necessary part of the creative process. Depression is a potential side effect that you should be aware of and not feel guilty about, but you should also seek to remedy the root causes, because it's probably not something that you can choose to get out of by yourself. And if you believe that you can choose to just feel happy and that you don't deserve your depression, that's just going to make it worse. So I hope I've provided some resources. I do want to make a whole new book sometime just about creative confidence and courage which will probably go a lot deeper into, specifically the stuff that I started to introduce in Bookcraft. But there's there's tons of great resources out there for people who are struggling. And I would, try to break your diet, your habits, your day-to-day, whatever you're doing right now, if it's not making you happy, if you continually are feeling bad for more than a week at a time, on the one hand, this too will pass. It's very normal to sometimes go through a period where you need a profound amount of rest and recharge. Especially I found when I finish a book, like when I finish a book and it's done after working for weeks and weeks and weeks, constant 10-hour grinds on the same book, it's exhausting. And when I finish, I may immediately get sick. I may immediately get depressed. I may need a week or two off just to recover. And that's okay. Be aware that could be part of your process, and it's completely fine to not do anything for a few weeks when you need to rest and recharge. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you've struggled with depression. Anxiety is the other flip side of the coin that I also have some experience about if you have questions. ADHD is not the purpose of this video. Maybe I will make some videos about that in the future. There is some content on writethemagic.com in the Grimoire section, which I think is really useful. So you might want to look at that also. Thanks. Bye-bye.